My daughter stopped her own wedding and handed me a note I was never meant to read. The morning of my daughter's wedding began like a dream I had replayed in my mind for years. I woke up before my alarm, already dressed in anticipation, standing by the window, watching sunlight spill over the quiet street. There was a strange calm in the air, the kind that makes you believe everything in life has finally aligned. I told myself this day would be simple, emotional. Yes, but predictable. Walk her down the aisle, smile through a few tears, shake hands, give a speech, and watch her begin a new chapter. That was the plan I had carried in my heart. At the venue, everything looked perfect. White flowers lined the aisle. Soft music floated through the hall, and guests whispered with excitement. Family members hugged me, congratulating me, telling me how proud I must be. I nodded and smiled, feeling that familiar mix of pride and nostalgia that every father feels when he realizes his little girl is no longer little. I remembered teaching her how to ride a bike, sitting beside her hospital bed when she had a fever, cheering louder than anyone at her school events. Those memories played gently in my mind, like a highlight reel of a life well lived as a parent. When the music changed and everyone stood, my heart began to pound. I turned, and there she was, my daughter, walking toward me in her wedding dress. For a moment, the entire room disappeared. All I could see was her smile, steady and calm, and the way her eyes searched the crowd until they found mine. She looked beautiful, confident, and grown in a way that made me realize just how much time had passed. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down, reminding myself to stay composed. As she reached the front, I took my place, hands folded, breathing slowly. I expected the usual rush of emotions: joy, relief, pride, nothing more. I believed this ceremony would be one of those life moments that follows a familiar script, the kind people talk about fondly but briefly. I had no reason to think otherwise. There were no signs, no warnings, no uneasy feelings pulling at me. The guests smiled, the officiant prepared to speak, and the groom waited patiently beside her. In that moment, I felt certain of one thing: whatever mistakes I had made in life, I had done my best as a father. I truly believed I was about to witness the happiest moment of my daughter's life, standing safely on the sidelines as a proud parent. I had no idea that this belief, this quiet confidence, was about to be tested in the most public and unforgettable way imaginable. The officiant had just begun to speak when something small but unmistakable shifted in the air. My daughter, who had been standing still and composed, suddenly tightened her grip on the bouquet in her hands. At first, I thought it was nerves. Weddings are overwhelming, and I told myself she was simply taking a breath, grounding herself before the vows. But then she looked at me again, really looked at me, and her expression wasn't nervous. It was deliberate. Slowly, almost carefully, she reached into the flowers. The bouquet rustled softly, a sound that felt far too loud in the quiet room. From between the white petals, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. My first thought was that it was a sentimental note, something sweet she wanted to share with her father before saying her vows. Maybe a thank you, maybe a memory. I even felt a faint smile tug at my lips. Without a word, she stepped forward. The groom turned slightly, confused, and the officiant paused mid-sentence. Guests shifted in their seats, whispers rippling through the room like a sudden breeze. My daughter didn't look at anyone else, not her husband-to-be, not her mother, not the crowd of family and friends. Her eyes stayed locked on mine as she crossed the small distance between us. When she reached me, she placed the note in my hands. Her fingers trembled for just a second before she pulled them away. I felt the paper before I read it, thin, creased, warm from being held so tightly. My hands began to shake, and I hated that people could see it. I searched her face for reassurance, some sign that this was a harmless gesture. Instead, she gave me a small, steady nod, as if to say, "It's time." The room was silent now. The music had stopped, and even the air felt heavy, as though everyone sensed they were witnessing something unscripted. I unfolded the note slowly, aware of every movement I made. The paper seemed to weigh more than it should have. Before I even read the words, A strange fear crept into my chest, an instinctive dread I couldn't explain. As my eyes scanned the first line, my breath caught. This wasn't a casual message. It wasn't decorative or symbolic. It was direct, personal, and unmistakably meant for me alone. My daughter stood there, waiting, her face calm but determined, as if she had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind. I felt exposed. Standing in front of so many people, while holding a message I wasn't prepared to receive. My heart thudded loudly in my ears, and I suddenly became aware of how small the room felt, how close everyone was. Whatever was written on that paper wasn't just words, it was a door opening. One I hadn't realized was still locked. And as I stood there holding that note, I knew the ceremony had already changed, even before anyone else understood why. The moment I read the words on the note, the world around me seemed to blur. The first sentence alone was enough to make my chest tighten and my vision sting. It wasn't angry, and it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest in a way that cut deeper than shouting ever could. My daughter had written about a promise I made when she was young, when I assured her I would keep no matter what. Seeing it written in her handwriting made it impossible to deny or soften. I had told myself for years that it hadn't mattered, that she was too young to remember. I was wrong. Each line pulled me backward through time, dragging memories I had carefully tucked away into the light. I remembered the night she mentioned in the note, a night I had convinced myself wasn't as important as it truly was. I could see her small face in my mind, waiting for me by the window, holding on to hope longer than she should have had to. I had chosen convenience over commitment that day, believing I would make it up to her later. Later never came in the way it should have. My hands tightened around the paper as the weight of it settled in. The note didn't accuse me outright, but it didn't excuse me either. She wrote about how that moment shaped her, how it taught her to rely on herself too early, how it made her question whether promises were real or just things people said when it suited them. Reading those words hurt more than any confrontation ever could. I had never known she carried that with her for so long. I felt a deep, quiet shame spread through me. I had been there for so many milestones, so many visible moments of her life, and I had let those convince me I was a good father in every way that mattered. But this note exposed the truth. Being present sometimes isn't the same as being dependable. I had missed something critical, and my daughter had paid the price in silence. As I stood there, memories of our relationship replayed in a new light. Moments I once considered small now felt enormous. Times when she brushed things off, when she stopped asking for certain things, when she learned to smile and move on without me noticing. I realized those weren't signs of strength, they were signs of adaptation. The final lines of the note were the hardest to read. She wrote that she didn't want an apology in front of everyone, and she didn't want to embarrass me. She wanted me to understand. She wanted me to know that today wasn't about blame, it was about truth. As my eyes reached the end of the message, my throat closed, and I had to fight the urge to break down. Standing there in that room, holding a piece of paper that carried decades of unspoken pain, I understood something with painful clarity. This wasn't a surprise. This was a long-delayed conversation, finally finding its moment. As the silence stretched on, my daughter finally spoke. Her voice steady, but filled with emotion she had clearly learned to control. She didn't raise it, and she didn't cry. That alone told me how long she had been preparing for this moment. She explained that she hadn't chosen this day to hurt me or to make a scene. She chose it because it was the first time in her life she felt strong enough to speak without fear of being dismissed. She told me that growing up, she had often swallowed her feelings, convincing herself that certain disappointments were just part of life. She learned early not to ask too much, not to expect too much, not because she didn't trust me, but because she didn't want to be hurt again. Hearing her say that felt like a quiet confession, one that had been waiting years for air. She wasn't angry anymore, she was tired of carrying it alone. This day, she said, mattered because it was the day she was making a lifelong promise to someone else. Standing there, about to vow honesty, trust, and commitment, she realized she couldn't begin that chapter while holding onto a truth she had never spoken. She wanted to walk into her marriage free of the weight she had carried since childhood. To do that, she needed me to truly see her not as the little girl who always forgave, but as an adult who deserved to be heard. She also admitted that she had tried to bring this up before, but every time she thought about it, she convinced herself it wasn't worth reopening old wounds. Life moved forward, and so did we. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, and the moment always slipped away. Until now, this was the one day when she knew I would listen. I couldn't walk away, and I couldn't deflect. I was there, fully present, with nowhere to hide. My daughter said something then that I will never forget. She told me she didn't want me to feel ashamed in front of everyone. She wanted accountability, not humiliation. The note, she explained, was her way of keeping the message private while making the moment real. She trusted me to carry it with the seriousness it deserved. As she finished speaking, I saw not defiance in her eyes, but relief, the kind that comes after holding your breath for too long. She wasn't trying to rewrite the past, she was trying to release it. And in that instant, I understood that this moment wasn't meant to break us. It was meant to give us a chance to finally stand on honest ground, even if that ground felt unsteady at first. After the ceremony ended, the applause felt distant, almost unreal. People smiled, hugged, and celebrated. But inside me, everything had shifted. I watched my daughter laugh with her new husband, her face lighter than it had been all day, and I realized something profound. Whatever pain that note had carried, letting it go had freed her. The question that remained was whether I was willing to do the same kind of work to earn my place in her life moving forward. Later that evening, away from the noise and the guests, she found me sitting alone. There was no anger in her approach, no accusation in her posture. She sat beside me quietly, the way she used to when she was a child and didn't know how to put big feelings into words. That simple gesture broke me more than anything else that day. It reminded me of how much trust she was still offering. Even after everything, I told her I was sorry, not the quick, defensive kind of apology, but the kind that takes responsibility. I admitted that I had minimized that moment from her childhood because facing it meant admitting I had failed her. I told her I had confused being present with being dependable, and that I now understood the difference. She listened without interrupting, letting the silence do its work. When she finally spoke, she didn't say she forgave me right away. She said she appreciated the honesty. That, she explained, was what she had wanted all along. That conversation changed the tone of our relationship. We stopped pretending that the past hadn't shaped us. Instead of avoiding difficult topics, we allowed them to exist without fear. It wasn't instant healing, but it was real. Over the weeks that followed, we talked more openly than we ever had before. About expectations, about disappointment, about love that doesn't always look perfect, but still matters deeply. I also learned something about forgiveness that night. It isn't a single moment or a dramatic declaration. It is a process, one that requires patience, humility, and consistency. My daughter didn't ask me to erase the past. She asked me to show up differently in the future. That was a responsibility I was finally ready to accept. Today, when I look back on her wedding, I no longer see it as the day my confidence as a father was shattered. I see it as the day my relationship with my daughter became honest. The note she handed me didn't end anything, it began something new. A bond built not on assumptions or silence, but on truth, accountability, and the possibility of genuine forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more real stories about family, truth, and second chances.